All right. Every one of these techniques we're going to be doing wet and wet, but not dripping, sopping, totally and completely wet. So I just cut clean water on my brush. I'm going to take a little bit of the excess water off on my brush. Now, inside my first circle, I am just painting in clean water. If it goes outside the edges, that's fine. Not a big deal. All right. So I am going to just let that sit for a minute. Okay. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to get a little bit more water. And I'm going to do the same thing in the next sphere or the next circle below, which is the blue-violet gradient. All right. So just working on a damp surface. Putting clean water into both of those circles. All right? Now, to create a blue gradient, what I might find in certain areas of the sky, which, as we see in this reference, right, I'm just kind of looking at this gradient area right here, where it goes from this blue and then transitions down a little bit. So I'm going into my blue, and I'm going to get, with my damp brush, that blue here, all right? So it's fairly dark, but I have a damp surface. So what I'm going to do is this, watch. I'm going to put that blue in there, and you can see since the surface is damp, it's creating a nice, really soft edge. But I want to transition that so that it gets lighter. So I'm going to go about halfway, and then I'm going to clean my brush out completely. Cafeteria. Clean my brush out completely so that it's damp. Just touch the water again, and now I'm going to pull this from here, using it as a source, and pull that over into the rest of the circle. And it creates that transition. So I can come all the way back here and pull that over, and I'm creating that transition in blue. So it's just a small, quick blue value scale. And I got to let it dry. Now, this is a little bit more dry, so I'm going to come in with a blue-violet. So I'm getting the violet, again, a little bit richer, and I'm just going to meet in the middle with the blue and the violet. Need a little bit more blue because, again, violet is going to try to overpower it because it's the darker value color. And again, I'm using just the side of the brush on the damp surface, covered about halfway, clean my brush, take some of the excess water off. And look at that cool effect right there. It's kind of feathering. Now I'm going to come back in and work this gradient over to a lighter version of that. Now that doesn't show me a whole lot of transition in that gradation. So guess what? I can come back in and put a little bit more of the blue-violet if it needs to be a little bit more intense. But again, I got to be careful. I don't want to overwork an area, right? So I clean the brush again. Now I see that line that separates it. Clean the brush, and then with a damp brush, I can just kind of pull that over to create a better transition. All right, so we can see that transition there. All right, now, if we're doing a blue to a yellow-orange, I'm going to need some clean water, and I'm going to need to put clean water in my second. You might have a little bit of blue in your water. That's okay. I didn't change my water out. But to do a blue to a yellow-orange, I want to put in I want to work on a damp surface again. So I just put some water in there while I'm letting that dry, or dry slightly. All right, blue to yellow-orange. This is going to be where if we had a sky that had like a dusk, an evening. All right, so I've got my blue. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to take my damp paper towel. Since I have a blue-violet, I want a blue So I'm just going to take my damp paper towel and I'm going to clean out my palette tray here. Alright, I'll get rid of some of that. Got my paper towel, other paper towel here. Now, I want to make a nice soft yellow-orange first in my tray. So, yellow-orange, so I want more yellow. Again, orange is the darker value. So I get a good amount of yellow. And then I'm going to come right to my orange. Maybe get a little bit more yellow just to give myself that nice yellow-orange there. Okay, so I'm going to try to get the excess paint off of the brush and leave it, just going to leave it in that little well right there. Then I'm going to clean my brush out, and I'm going to get to my blue. I'm going to put my blue over here. Alright, I'm going to do the same thing I did here with the blue gradient. But where they overlap, okay, so I'm putting that blue in about halfway, clean my brush, take the excess water off. Now come into my yellow-orange, and I'm going to overlap the yellow-orange a little bit into that blue. Now maybe come back and get a little bit more orange. Mix it up a little bit with the yellow-orange. So I'm just kind of creating a little bit of a circular skyscape here, right? A little bit of a transition from a night sky. And you can see how the yellow and the blue are kind of making a little bit of a green there. That softness, I just took a little bit of the yellow-orange back in, and then I'm just pushing that up a little bit where it would feather into the blue. Take some of the water off, maybe come back with my blue a little bit and hit that midline between the two. Hit that midline between the two and create that nice soft transition where the sky would be changing color at night. And even if I wanted this, I know this is such a condensed small area, even if I wanted to darken that a little bit more, you know, I could come in with a little bit of a darker blue even. I just clean my brush and I could just punch up that blue a little bit more. Alright. Now, gray violet. What's gray violet? Well, if you're doing a night sky and you've got the complement, right, the clouds in front of this color sky would generally have that gray violet kind of color. So it, again, whenever you use black, you've got to be careful not to use too much. So if I'm doing a gray violet, I'm just taking a little bit of water here, and I'm going to work on a wet surface. So I'm taking clean water, I'm painting in my circle again with clean water. Now if you guys don't want to do this as I'm doing it and you want to watch, and then later on I'm going to post the video, alright, I have to edit it, so next period I'll be editing it and I'll post it. So damp surface there. Let me take that yellow-orange that I have, because I'm doing this over the night sky, right? So let's create the atmosphere. So here's my yellow-orange sky. The chat. Oh, sorry, Carol. Alright, so putting in my yellow-orange sky. Now I'm cleaning my brush. So this is my sunset, this is my dusk hours. Clean my brush off. Now, I want to get a nice soft feathery kind of a sky cloud. So I'm taking a small brush. Alright, just a small brush. You don't have to, you could use the tip of this brush and I'll show you that in a minute. Just going to take a small brush. I'm going to take some violet. That's a lot of violet. And now, the gray. As I said, you've got to be super careful when using black. And what I had from the amount of violet that I had on my brush, and I went into the black, you can see I actually got a really nice gray violet already because of the amount of violet that I had in my brush. So you see how I mixed that up right there? Just a dot of black creates that nice violet. Now if I want to get these clouds nice and soft, touch the water a little bit, and now I'm just going to kind of come in, and these are going to be soft. I need a little bit less water, a little bit more paint, because it's actually lifting off a little bit. So these are this nice, I'm just barely touching, just kind of bouncing that brush along. Wispy clouds in that sunset to create that gray violet. Maybe get a little bit more violet in there just to kind of tighten it up a little. And just some real soft, wispy, sunsetty clouds. As my friend Bob Ross used to say, happy clouds. Now that would be the start, right? That would just be the start of those clouds. They're still fairly soft and innocuous. If it was this dark and this was the front of them, I would probably need them to be a little bit darker. So if I go in with a little bit more black now, I just clean my brush. I come into the same wash that I just used, but with a little less water. Now I can kind of come in a little bit more of a dry overlap technique, but since the surface is damp, right? Since the surface is damp, I can kind of detail those clouds a little bit, kind of picking up more of the shadow as to what would be, in front of them. Because the light is going to reflect off them in a variety of ways, and it's going to create that little bit of a shadow below them. All right? And again, this is all just randomness to the clouds, but you can see how that makes a really nice, soft, cloud-like sunset effect. Okay, a gray gradient. This is where we're going to be dealing with the softness of the clouds and the billowiness of the clouds. What we would see in this area here, okay, that gray. So again, damp surface, not too wet. You don't want it just kind of going all over the place and going crazy. I'm going to use the same round brush. Let me clean out my gray violet there. So I'll just take my paper towel and clean out my gray violet. I'm just doing gray. So with the gray gradient, grab a dot of water. Okay, that's a fairly medium gray mixture that I just did here. Fairly medium gray mixture. Now when I start to apply that on here, I'm going to see that, let's say this is the white cloud, right? The whole thing is the white cloud. Now I want to accent that cloud. So there's the dark part of the cloud. Now I clean my brush. You can see it just kind of made like a really cool tie-dye effect. Now if I clean my brush, I can create variations of that medium gray wash that I could pull and manipulate, soften the edges. I'm not brushing it away, I'm just kind of touching the edge of it and pulling the edge of the gray shape out so that it kind of feathers and filters. Now again, you don't see the shape of the cloud, but you're just trying to look at creating the atmosphere of the cloud. So right now, that's the base setup, that's the base wash. If I came back in, I'm just going to use a small brush again. All right, a little bit more paint, a little bit less pigment, or a little bit less water, and kind of tighten up like storm clouds, the bottom of them here. Paper is damp, So it's really creating a nice bleed effect. On these clouds. So you see what I just did there? That looks really strong underneath the shade of the cloud. This one got a little bit off, so I'm just going to soften that line. I'm just with the tip of it, just kind of pulling that gray up and softening that edge. Soften this edge just a little bit in here. And that's a nice gray gradation on a damp surface that's going to create a nice look. Let me take this light out of the way. See it a little bit better there, yeah. All right, see how it creates that nice soft billowiness of the clouds? Now I want to do the same thing in the blue-gray. All right, so my blue-gray is going to be what we'd look at in those areas of the clouds. But it's reflecting, it's picking up some of the reflections of what might be underneath of it or what might be around it. So it's the same process here. Clean water. My water's not totally clean anymore, but it's kind of blue, it's kind of gray, which is fine. I'm doing a blue-gray anyway. That's the one thing. If you start mixing with a lot of colors, I definitely suggest you go back and clean your water early and often. Okay? So I have my gray. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to put that gray in that space first. And the blue is going to be the accent. So let me get a little bit more in here. All right. Again, I'm going to dance the brush around a little bit in a variety of ways just to kind of create some cloud-like shapes. And I'm going to soften. So this would be the bottom of the cloud. This would be the shape on the other cloud here. And I'm going to clean my brush. And I'm going to soften the edge like I did before. Take some of the excess water off. Soften the edge of that scumbled mark. Just like I did, lighten that up a little bit. Pull that. I don't like the shape of that. I can kind of push. There. So that kind of looks like another area of kind of a storm cloud. So now if I take the blue, okay, medium amount of water, so this is a medium wash, and I try to accent that blue a little bit here with the damp surface, okay, putting it in almost on top of the same marks that I made with the darker gray color. All right, then I'm going to clean my brush. That's too harsh right now. So if I want that to appear as if it's reflecting on the surface of the cloud, I'm going to clean my brush, dry the bristles off, and then I'm going to pull this out and pull it up into the white of the clouds. So maybe that would be the edge of the sky. Kind of what we did here with the blue gradient. So I'm going to pull that up to the edge. I'm going to pull it out. But again, I can't overwork the area of paper, so I'm not pressing too hard. I'm just kind of creating that subtle blue-gray. I'm not mixing the blue and the gray until I put the blue on top of the gray on the paper. And again, if we had clouds drawn in where we were looking at the base of a cloud like this where I can see that blue-gray, all right, that's obviously where it would be applied more. But there's ways of building clouds that we're going to see in the next exercise that's going to create this. Okay?